ladies and gentlemen. This session is called Tomorrow's World. How many of you have seen the movie Soylent Green, out of interest? Soylent Green. God, what an appallingly low ratio. It's the best, one of the best films ever. Well, what a pity you haven't seen it. It takes place in 2022, and it was made in 1973. And in it, the future technology is way, way behind what we've already got. But some of the dystopian sort of human sides of human existence have gone way further. People are eating little tablets, which are called Soylent Green. Or there's Soylent Red and Soylent Pink too. It's a great film. Our time scale this afternoon is to talk about the kind of world that takes us up to where Soylent Green was, 2022. I'm a bit skeptical sometimes of these Tomorrow's World type sessions because people often rather poor at predicting what is going to happen, but it doesn't stop us trying. Just as the organizers of this conference have a meticulous timetable, we deviate from it almost as soon as we sit down. Nevertheless, it's always good to have a timetable to know what we're deviating from. The great Indian economist, Meghnad Desai, who works at the London School of Economics, made an observation about the Indian planning system, which was, it was surprising, he said, how much more the Indian planners could tell you about what was going to happen than they could ever tell you about what had actually already happened. And he didn't mean that they were good at predicting. He just meant they were appalling at knowing what had happened in the past. Few people are good at prediction, but that doesn't stop us, if you like, casting our minds ahead and looking at visions of the future. Right, what this session consists of is we're going to have a little conversation with, we're going to have a presentation, first of all, from Maarten Lens-FitzGerald, who's one of the co-founders of Layar. You might have seen the display outside. Augmented reality research. We're going to then bring up the rest of our panel, who are JP Rangaswami, who's the chief scientist at BT, Kai Huang, who's he and his brother were inventors of Guitar Heroes. That's been outside as well. I think many people have been playing with that. And as Andreas Dengel, who's a professor of artificial intelligence. So we'll bring them up after, but we're going to start with Maarten Lens-FitzGerald to give us our first view of tomorrow's world and bring us up to speed on augmented reality research. Maarten.
Hi, my name is Maarten Lens-FitzGerald, and less than a year ago, together with Claire Boonstra and Raimo van der Klein, we started Layar, an augmented reality platform. Whom of you here have already experienced a form of augmented reality? Can we see a raise of hands? Good, I like that. Still some work to do, but not everybody, so that's good. So today I'll share what we've achieved until now in those almost 11 months that we've been running, and also share with you the biggest insight that we have learned from augmented reality. Augmented reality is an emerging mass medium. It's not just a feature, it's not just an interface, it's a new world that we have discovered in a way. And it's similar to a story you've heard before, similar patterns that you know. I'm really honored to show my first website here I made in '94 as an intern at Shell Research Laboratories in Amsterdam. The web in '94 was a place where lots of people, academics, nerds, technicians, all kinds of people really saw the potential and made their first website. It's where the web got their traction, its traction. There were no standards yet really at that moment, but people saw a great use, its great potential. It didn't have, as I said, standards. It didn't have ways to, use your credit card in a safe way. But it did have some things, to find your way, like cool side of the day, because, there were good things going on. And it really was taking off at that moment. It speeded up when Netscape came on board. Netscape created a curated ecosystem. A curated ecosystem of a browser on one side for everybody to use, and server products for businesses. They could do e-commerce. They could publish their information in a good way that they have. So therefore, the businesses started to really find their way towards the web and see its potential, feel its potential, earn its potential. America Online came on board, and they sent basically everybody, at least in the US, and probably maybe even in the rest of the world, these little disks. I mean, who remembers those disks that you got from America Online to get on their system? Microsoft prepackaged Internet Explorer with Windows 95. Everybody was getting online. And it was massive distribution of this new medium called the World Wide Web at that moment. And with all this reach, with all this potential, with all these standards, medium-specific endeavors and content was being developed. And companies like Amazon were created, companies like eBay. These companies could not exist without the web. You cannot build a bookstore as big to fit Amazon. Yet they did exist on the web. And today, well, we all know how it's going today. You cannot live without the web anymore. It's a mass medium, it's a mass market, and everybody, makes a good living. I think Google does too. So similar patterns with augmented reality, an emerging mass medium. There's not really much standards yet. The content that we see first on augmented reality is repurposed content, almost brochureware, if you will. Just the where is layer, where is this, where is that? If you want to find a cool layer, you can use the featured set in the Layar browser. Yet, there's also a curated ecosystem coming on board. So you have a browser on iPhone, on the Android, and you have server tools for businesses to create good augmented reality experiences. So they actually can do this now. And it doesn't have to be that difficult. We just also released paid layers, so that means that they can also monetize their content. And now massive distribution has started. For the people that were just in the US or will be returning any moment soon, Verizon just launched its latest Droid commercial using Layar's AR to sell the device. So many eyeballs are now seeing this great potential. Samsung, number 2 in the device manufacturer market after Nokia, they are pre-installing Layar on their latest main device. Tens of millions of people by the end of the year will have Layar on their phone. So it's a new and emerging mass medium if you look at all this reach that will be begotten by the end of the year. And what we see now on the Layar platform is that medium-specific content is being created. Content that does not exist on the web, that cannot be put in a magazine or on TV, it only exists in AR, and it really is in its own there. And right now, we believe the future Amazon, the future eBay is being born amongst the developers' augmented reality. It's going well with Layar's AR platform. We have, in the 10, 11 months that we exist, almost 1.8 million users. So not just download users, people actually using it. We have 3,000 developers. These are companies like you have your web agency, but then they are developing AR experiences for themselves, for brands, for publishers, for anybody who sees already this potential and is using it. There are several campaigns we just heard about yesterday that will be starting soon in the US with main brands using Layar's AR to get out there, to get in touch with our customer. We have over 600 layers published. And on the back end, we see that there's a couple thousand in development. So there's lots more coming on board. And every day, we serve out 1.2 million augmented objects. So people are actually using it and finding something. So there are several types of layers. Like I said, there's the where is layer. Simple layer showing you where something is. And it works as follows. The phone knows where you are through its GPS. It knows where you're pointing it at through the compass. It knows that, for instance, here you're at the Grove, you're pointing it at the pond of the Grove. There's an article in Wikipedia about that pond. We have that coordinate, so it can, hey, right there on the screen, we'll put that pond and more information about that. That's how it works, and that way you can see more about and know more what's going on around you. You can learn more about your context. Simple where is layers, directories, there's even an in and out layer for the people from California. Another type, what there is, and this is one of the most popular ones right now, that's live and dynamic, and this example here is tweets around. So it has the Twitter feed, and you can see who tweeted around you, around this location right here, right now. So you get an idea that maybe your neighbor was also watching Idols just now, and that he likes it. And maybe you didn't know he liked Idols, and maybe it's a good idea to start talking to him and get to know him. In Holland, we have Casper. And this is a Layar, or actually it's a company that knows all the planes that are flying right now. So they made a Layar where you can see if there's a plane going by, what plane it is, and where it's headed. Live and dynamic information. And yeah, this is really nice. One of my favorite layers are the insight layers. Layers that provide you an idea of what happened here before or what will happen in the future. And it's not just the information, but it's also that you can experience it. Right here is the Berlin Wall layer. So if you go to Berlin, the wall isn't there anymore. You might have heard about it, you might have read about it, but I don't know, you might want to get a bratwurst. But if you look at this layer and look at the wall, you can see how high it was, and you can experience it. You can see and understand maybe, get a feeling of how much of your view was obstructed because of this wall. So Layar here, or augmented reality, really helps you understand and give you insight. One other example, in the US, you have the recovery program. And the recovery program, that data is published, so somebody made the recovery layer. And you can see which companies got how much money. And of course, I knew about this layer, but what was really nice about it is through Twitter, I saw a student from Stanford wondering, why did Stanford get 2 million? And that's an insight, transparency that you can get with augmented reality by getting information in its context. Lastly, the last category where augmented reality really comes into its own, it's stories and games, where you really use everything that augmented reality has to offer, all its graphical potential, audio, video, context. Ubisoft recently launched its latest version of Splinter Cell, a big game on the Xbox, I believe, lots of money, lots of marketing to get that out there. What they did with augmented reality is they created a prequel to the game. So when you come to Amsterdam, that's where this prequel is located, you can actually play a mission being the agent of the game, solve the crime, solve the puzzle, and if you do it well, you end up at the store, you get a free t-shirt and a discount to the game. And you're totally in it while you do it. Another example of a game is you can put 3D objects outside on the lawn, and you can gain points by running to it. Hey, you're Mario. You're Pac-Man yourself. Or you can put Coke bottles there, and hey, maybe it's a commercial campaign at that moment. This is all already possible right now, and it's being done on our platform. We have 600 layers right now, thousands coming. So we know that there's something this medium also needs. Like TV has its electronic program guide. Like magazines have a kiosk, a magazine stand where you pick it out. Where internet, the web has Google. Layar also just recently announced Layar Stream, which is search and discovery for augmented reality. This means that we index cross-layer what's going on here. So there's a picture on Panoramio. There's a Wikipedia article. There's a tweet. There is whatever people made. There's maybe even a game around the corner that you can start right now. And you don't need to just open that layer or know about it. You can just see it because you open up Stream. We'll be launching this soon. And not just the ranking and how people can get to this hidden world of augmented reality is what's going to help. It's also just the simple fact that right now we will have less drama for everyday use. That means you can just check out what's going on in this hidden world, not holding your phone up. And when you see something, you click it and you play it, you view it, you do it. And this way, augmented reality will gain its place, will gain its place for everyday use for everybody. We're just at the start right now, but it's very promising, and we definitely believe that this is an emerging medium. And I hope you guys, maybe believe this too. I'd like to conclude with a video we will be showing for the first time today. And it's a video which shows all the possibilities, what you can do with augmented reality in every day. Thank you.
Maarten.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maarten, very much indeed. And maybe the other panel can come up and take their seats here. While they do, Maarten, what's your revenue model out of interest? What do you...
Well, paid layers helps us, but mostly actually the developers. And right now, actually media is discovering, or brands are discovering that we have a lot of potential of reaching people and doing something for them. And they have media budgets. So they're actually saying, well, we can give this to you. So we could do that, but there's some other things coming soon which we will do and which will help everybody.
Right. But you're covering your cost at the moment, or you're...
We're VC funded,
Right.
and we're building a medium, so that doesn't make money yet. We need to give it away to build this.
Right. Okay, welcome to the other panel members. Let me just introduce them. Andreas Dengel there at the far end, Professor of Artificial Intelligence. And Andreas, you gave me your card, and I've actually... Oh no, I've got it here. At the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence, which is the biggest and best in the world in that subject area. Next to Andreas is JP Rangaswami, who's the chief scientist at BT. Were you an investment banker once, JP? No, I thought I'd mention that. And Kai Huang, who, with his brother Charles, was one of the inventors of Guitar Heroes. Red Octane was the company, wasn't it, Kai? Which you then sold to
Activision Blizzard.
Activision, and you've just parted company with them. What I'd like to do is just chat to you each about your own technologies and see whether you can match Maarten's enthusiasm and passion for his. And Andreas, let's start with you. Text 2.0.
All right.
Talk us through it. There's a demo outside, isn't there? People might have seen it, but they might not have. Tell us what it's about.
Well, I hope you guys have had a chance to already have a look on this. So Text 2.0 is focusing on new options provided by electronic media combined with traditional reading. So you may know that reading a crime or a thriller as a book is a very haptic experience, but sometimes reading electronic text may be bothering some people. But having text on an electronic device also reveals new option that the text itself, some words of the text or the text as a whole, could be a key, opening up a new world behind the text. And if you have devices like today's eye trackers, which are able to really focus on what you read, they really could use the keys to open up the doors, providing translations, providing some acoustic additional information, some explanations, and so on. And therefore, it makes much more fun to read. It's very well a good complement for e-learning, helping people to understand better, and furthermore, also to make people close to each other because they show you ways to persons, to events, to locations, to topics, and so on.
So, is it all built around eye tracking, though? I mean, is eye tracking the key thing, or?
I think so, because, well, human beings tend to learn a lot via the eyes. And on one hand side, the eyes is much more in just the interface to read, but it's more behind the eyes is the brain. And in order to observe what people are interested in, for example, to measure relevancy about how careful a text is read, or whether it's skimmed or neglected, you can learn about what people are interested in. And this also provides new options for new business cases.
So you've developed the technology that allows to track the eye. Do you know how we use our eyes, though? I mean, you can track our eyes, but do you know that when I stick on a word, it means I don't understand the word, and up can come a definition of that word to help me out? Is that, I mean, are you good at that side, if you like, the sort of the bit between the human being and the eye tracking, as opposed to the eye tracking and the computer?
Yeah, exactly. So if you go 10 years back, you had these eye trackers where you have to fix the head and do some experiments like heat maps to see how the layout really fits to the perception of the people. But these days, you can sit free in front of any device. And so you are able to really follow the eyes in a very precise way, so which helps you to see how the saccades fits with the fixation points, and then you could classify different kinds of readers, see reading behavior, and therefore also we proved that you can do some control experiments, really seeing what part of the text is relevant in order to solve, for example, tasks. Yeah, and this could also be transferred to any infotainment or entertainment device, so that we have these iBooks, so I is E-Y-E, which allows you to read books and to hear what's inside a story. For example, if you read Karl May as a story and the Indians would attack, you can hear the Indians and the horse is running around because you just pass this passage in the book.
Very good. How far off is all of this? How far down the path would you say you are?
Well, I think in the last 5 years, the eye tracking technology really did an excellent job. The problem these days is that many people do not know that we are that far with eye tracking technology. So we need we have some chicken egg problem, so that we need a driving force of the market who really pushes this technology to make it cheaper, yeah, so that it's widespread use. But the steps to further develop the technology are really huge, so that if we would find a promoting organization or a promoting company, it would really help to make widespread use of this technology. So to build maybe in the future some nice mobile devices having infrared detectors for eye trackers, and to help people to have an electronic complement, helping to remember, helping to have explanations and other things.
And there's no plan for us to use the eye as an interface. I mean, so that instead of the mouse, I can just instruct the computer with my eyes, because it wouldn't know what was an instructing eye movement and what was an eye movement, so to speak. I suppose it doesn't work.
Yes, there are some nice applications, especially for handicapped people, who could use the eyes for making special gestures in order to direct the device. And this could also be transferred to other business cases. If you go outside to see the demo, you can just use the eyes to get an automatic link generated by the system to make very short gestures, and it works very well.
And in terms of sort of radicalism, is it a stupid question to ask, we're stuck with reading in your world, aren't we? I mean, it's kind of, we do still read, I mean, as opposed to using other ways of getting information out of the machine.
Well,
so it's the sort of backing of the reading technology.
Yeah, reading technology means also to dive into the story, yeah, to make it more visible for you, because you have always these imaginations being a part of the story. And I think this eye tracking technology helps you to get another dimension of impressions, whether they are acoustically or visually, and could further help to be part of the story, to feel the story, or think about having language labs where young people could learn foreign languages, and they would stop at a specific word where you can show not only the word in the different language, but also have the acoustic, the spelling of the word, have maybe a picture which complements it, and so it may be more fun to learn the language.
Augmented reading, as opposed to...
Exactly.
Right, very good. Thank you very much.
Where we are just applying for a patent for mobile devices, and the interesting stuff is that based on our eye tracking technology and the evaluations we made, we found out that based on the test results, this also works without eye tracking, because we received the impression how the screen itself is used and how users behave and what parts are read. And this could be transferred to mobile devices as well.
So that's your patent.
Well, exactly.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Andreas. Let's talk to JP for a bit. JP, you're chief scientist at BT.
That's right.
How many are you chief of? How many have you got?
Well, a very small team. I mean, I'd like to be measured on outputs, not inputs.
Right. Tell us what you do, what you're working on.
I really have 3 roles. One, I look after the voice infrastructure for the firm, make sure it's brought up to the digital age and driven forward, because we've invested a lot in the digital infrastructure and we believe there's a lot of value to be had out of it. 2, I chair a company called Ribbit, which is, to me, the future of voice, as we start separating the function of voice from the infrastructure. The tagline for Ribbit is bring your own network, which is not something you would expect a telco to say. And 3, I spend time looking at what software does and where it's going, because that's, anyone who tells me he's doing software research 10 years forward, I don't even know how to parse that statement. I can understand hardware development times taking long, right? In software, it's a different element, although I will come to explaining where I'm heading shortly.
Okay, well, take us through start with the second one of those 3, detaching the voice from the infrastructure, from the network. I didn't quite understand what you meant by that.
I think, you've got to see that there are actually 4 shifts happening right now.
Okay.
One, things that used to be hardware are available in software, and that means that it reduces the cost of innovation, of failure, and of participation. If you take particularly the cost of failure, one way of looking at the financial crisis was that all the successes were privatized and all the failures were socialized.
Yeah.
Right? That is the exact opposite of what happens in the open source world, where your losses are privatized and your successes are socialized, because adoption by the community takes the value.
They pick up the bit that's
right?
worth picking up, absolutely.
The cost of participation is very much, I think, when I look at the 3 people on the panel with me, the changes, for hundreds of years, we had character-based interaction with technology and with information. About 40 years ago, we switched to a graphical user interface.
You mean really moving from a keyboard to a mouse?
Correct. Switching off just character to mouse, pointer, window, etc. And that paradigm has lasted the best part of 40 years. And now we're seeing, children would walk up to a TV screen and say it doesn't work because they touch it. Okay? They expect touch to respond. Right? And that's very recent, and now we're hearing that your eyeballs can be tracked. You can augment the vision with something else. You're able to deal with motion like with the Wii. You're able to merge some of these things like with Guitar Hero. So we've suddenly moved to a world where participation, which used to be restricted to people who can read, who could manage a keyboard in a particular form, is now available to a much wider group of people. Right? The third element, I think, is that when you switch from a closed to an open mindset, you change a lot of the rules. Because one could argue at a layer of abstraction that you needed Microsoft before Linux could exist. You needed Skype before Ribbit or Google Voice could exist. You needed the iPhone before Android could exist, because in order to break an existing hegemony or monopoly, you may have to behave end-to-end control. But once you've established the breakthrough and you've disrupted, then you're able to create much more open waves. And many of the things I'm seeing, even on stage today, are people who are creating layered services. They may be the only ones called Layar, but a lot of people are now working on being able to provide the layered service.
In open platforms.
Open multi-sided, no one can actually employ all the smart people, not even Google. So there is an expectation, you start partnering.
Because of effect.
The because effect.
I'm sorry, you had 3 issues.
You've been reading my blog.
You had 3 issues, hardware, software, open or closed, and what was the third one?
The third element is that which was static is becoming dynamic or flow. And one of the other things you've been seeing as a repeated statement through is the importance of carrying context. Right? Now we have arguments about private data or public data. We've had discussions about the kind of layers that you can add on to augment information. But as soon as you move away from a static mindset of information, you're in a whole new ball game in terms of how you can create sort of almost wraps of information and context around what you're having. And that starts creating, like the question I was asking during the private data element yesterday, new problems. Okay? I've seen so many consequences of these changes that were unintended, that it starts setting up, I think, the basis for why, Tim Berners-Lee and team are looking at, at the Web Science Trust and what they're trying to do. Because we have now a new set of problems we wouldn't have imagined. And they're social, they're anthropological, they're to do with the economics of the new world, abundance rather than sort of scarcity. But we've also had behaviors like, three I can recall almost straight away. Someone in Pakistan wanted to shut off YouTube briefly because there was a cartoon or illustration to do with Muhammad, okay? And so the instruction was given, take that down straight away. Naturally, in a national ISP, you just shut off all control. But somebody else had written an agent to say, how can I keep the minimum number of hops in view for how I get to YouTube? And the way the ISP had implemented it, somebody in Singapore figured out that going to the Pakistan dead page was the fastest route to go. Other people were watching Singapore or PCCW. And suddenly 40% of the world's traffic at that time started going on to this nothing page because people had created algorithms to try and get there fast. But they got nowhere fast. Okay? There is good anecdotal evidence that the biggest blowout that Skype had was because people hadn't figured out that those who had volunteered to be supernodes for Skype were also possibly volunteers for the latest release of Microsoft at the time, of Vista. So everybody was downloading the patches at around the same time, and a large number of supernodes were knocked out. So we're learning things in this interconnected world that we never had to consider before in the complex adaptive system. And that is not just about the human side that we've spoken of, but even about the system side.
Right. Okay, well, you've given us a good taxonomy of the issues there. Tell us what gizmos, gadgets, extra facilities, brilliant software BT is going to be selling to us in the next 5 years. And it'll change my life.
Just looking forward, start imagining that what's happening with voice is what had already happened with image or with print, okay? Print, 30 years ago, you had a two-pass mindset. You had to go somewhere, give your film in, it got developed, then you went, selected, looked at negatives and said, you know what, I'll take 3 copies of number 13 and I'll take an enlargement of number 15. I'll cut out all the middle. What's happening today, even if you just go to Flickr and see the properties that you are uploading when you upload a photograph, there's a huge amount of rich metadata that goes wrapping this digital object that is the photograph, right? You will know, it's auto-date and time-stamped, quite often geolocated. You know the filter, you know the focal length, you know the device used. You know so much about the photograph. And these things start changing how you can sort of work with things. The same has happened with voice, right? One way of looking at what we used to call voicemail is that something that used to be synchronous is now asynchronous as well. And you can capture a lot of information about the conversation, right? Cheaply and with social tagging possible on top. So now I can take a conversation, I can move it around. At one extreme, I will Photoshop the conversation. At the other extreme, I'll watermark the conversation and say, nobody can touch it, it's sacrosanct. And all the issues about privacy and sharing and rights still come through. But the premise is that everything that we used to consider synchronous now has the capacity to be asynchronous as well. And everything we used to consider asynchronous now has the capacity to be synchronous as well. We are the first generation to live in an environment where everything we use to communicate can be persisted, archived, and searched and retrieved. No generation before us has had that. We may claim that you can retrieve information that well about communication in the past. It's just not been true. That changes our behaviors, right? In the same way as I've got to understand that my children think paying £10 for a CD is not good, but paying £4 for a ringtone is okay. And I don't understand that, and I don't claim to, right? We also have new behaviors. Like when I'm speaking to my wife, she has to ask me, are you there? Because the expectation that your mobile phone signal will drop is higher. So if she doesn't hear me respond, then she wants to know that I'm still there.
Yeah.
Or you're sitting next to her and you're tweeting. You're like, what? I was there.
But look, just
I don't get away with
just
that.
finally, JP. I mean, it's quite abstract stuff. I mean, what's the actual package that is going to be on the market? I mean, it's a Google Voice type facility?
We are in the business of making everything a node on an IP infrastructure.
Right.
So that means, you should be able to get your doorbell to light up on your television screen. We have services, and we focused on customer service as the first thing to solve. So we brought social networking into the customer service environment, and that's taking off. We have devices, which we've spoken about, which I will not go any further on right here because they haven't been formally released. But if you followed our results a few days ago, you know that we have devices in the home that are transforming how you can communicate with each other in terms of tablets and how they work. Okay? I can't go further today, right now, but the signal you've got to take is when you move from an analog to a digital world, the rules change in what you can do. And at BT, we're taking that element very seriously, particularly because we want to be able to do this in an open, multi-platform, collaborative approach. And the communities are building.
Right. All right, JP, thank you very much. Kai, let's talk about Guitar Hero. Did you know it was going to be such a big success when you made it?
I wish I could say I did, but no way. No, absolutely not.
And what is it that makes a good game?
For us, creating Guitar Hero is a really interesting experience. I mean, as I just said, I had no idea whether it was going to be big or not, and certainly had no clue that it would become as big as it did. But we did learn many things. And what we learned about what made it so successful, I think, can be put into a couple of ways. First of all, the game was designed to be very accessible. And that is probably our number one guiding principle is accessibility. And that comes in multiple ways. First of all, if you think about games, most people, unless you're our target demographic, 14 to 24-year-old males, don't really play video game consoles. So how do you make it accessible for everybody? Well, you had to make a controller that was accessible. The input device had to be accessible. So we made a guitar. And when people look at a guitar, naturally, they kind of know what they're supposed to do with it, right? If you look at a typical game controller today, which looks like a bat and has 20 buttons on it, it's very difficult to figure out what you're supposed to do with that. So accessibility was a really big aspect of making it successful. Anybody can pick it up, anybody can play, and then from there, the second piece of it for us was it really had to be easy to pick up but challenging to master. It had to be easy enough that whether you're 5 to 55, and we specifically designed for that, right? That anybody can pick this up, they can start to play, get into it within the first 30 seconds, but that there's a long way to go. It's very difficult to master.
So that's the key. It's easy to pick up, but there's a long way to go. It's difficult to master.
That's right.
Now that isn't going.
I've only got 2 more years to go.
Maybe 3. But
that isn't going to change, though, is it? Tomorrow's world, that isn't going to change. That feature, human beings are not going to want things that are difficult to pick up or easy to master. So that doesn't change.
That doesn't change, and
right.
You can think of it as depth, right? There's real depth there.
Right. So it's actually like an ideal swimming pool for all the family. There's a shallow end and a deep end, and you can splash around comfortably at all levels. Now, just before we talk about the future of games and Guitar Heroes, what are you doing with Guitar Heroes specifically now? Because it has evolved and moved on.
That's right. So we do a lot of things with the game, and to sort of start from the beginning. Music games didn't really start in the US. We didn't create this category of music games. It actually started in Japan. Japanese have been playing music games for 10 years, and we looked at that market and we thought, oh, that's so interesting, it's so fascinating. People love these music games. They're very social, people love music, and they're a lot of fun. And we actually went to some of the Japanese companies and we said, hey, these games are great, why don't you bring those games into the US? And universally, they told us, we don't think there's a market for music games in the US. So thank goodness for us, right, that they said that. And when they said that, it really meant that we had to do it if we were going to do it. And so Guitar Hero, the concept of these music games didn't start with us. but it really, Guitar Hero, the game, really took it to another level. And so, what are we looking to do with that? Well, first of all, we think that the opportunity for music games is really just on, it's the beginning. Guitar Hero, if you think of music gaming, and if you think of this opportunity as two different categories and axes. One is musical instruments, and number two is genres of music. Guitar Hero has really just touched on rock music, starting with guitar, and of course it's now expanded so you can sing, there's a microphone, and you can play the drums, but that's it. So in this whole universe of all the different genres of music and all the different instruments there are, we've only touched. Cowbell Hero.
Oh,
Sitar Hero, right? It's,
we're cowbell.
Yeah.
It's not going to be as big, though, is it, actually?
And
Cowbell Hero,
it sounds kind
Probably
of funny.
a few more people playing sitar than guitar.
Sitar mic.
And it sounds funny, right? But if you had gone back 4 years ago before we launched Guitar Hero, every single person laughed when we said we were going to make a plastic guitar where you would play rock music, right? And so in my mind, yes, the opportunity potentially could be smaller in any of these other categories. But what we have to do is to create an experience that is fun and engaging, is accessible, easy to pick up, difficult to master. And what Guitar Hero has done is that it's really introduced people to a genre of music. So if you think about what Guitar Hero has done, rock music today, well, 4 years ago when we launched it, was really on the decline. Not as many people were listening to rock music. And certainly if you look at our target demographic, young kids who are 14 to 24, they weren't listening to the classic rock that was very popular a generation ago. And these music games, and what we're interested in doing with them now, is introducing people to genres of music that they never thought they would have liked. Kids never thought that they would have liked, the Sex Pistols and Rolling Stones and AC/DC and Metallica, right? Fantastic music. They just weren't listening to that. Not yet. So it's introducing people to genres of music through a fantastic experience that is the type of thing that we work on.
Okay. Where do games go? I mean, not just music games, but what's the next thing in games then?
There's a lot of different areas in game, and I'll start with a couple. First of all, I think there's going to be a huge shift. If you think of gaming today, it seems digital, it's software, it's technology, right? But it's really not, in the console world at least, it's really not a digital business. It is a packaged goods business, right? You go to the store, you have a box, there's a game, it's in a DVD-like case, you pay your 50, 60 pounds, and you bring that home and you shove it into your player. And historically, that's been the biggest market. It's still the biggest market today by far. But I think what we're going to see, and very well controlled, right? And that's part of the rationale. It's very easy to control that experience. But what we're seeing, and I think what we're going to see continue to accelerate, is gaming going digital. You're seeing a lot of that happen in Asia, where games really starting in Korea, and ultimately now the big markets in China, where games are going online, and you're able to go online in these massive worlds and play against tens to hundreds. That's right, to hundreds of millions of people, right? A game, perhaps the biggest online game in the world, World of Warcraft, has 12 million monthly active users. So 12 million people logging on and kind of playing in this virtual world. I think you're going to start to see that shift, and I think it's going to happen very fast.
I mean, that has been
about socializing this game to found a virtual band of different players?
We've thought about it, and looked at how you would do something like that. And so those are certainly opportunities that we have to explore, because the consumer is going online. The consumer's less and less interested in a physical packaged good product, and we need to go where the consumer is.
right. So look, there's one development is the online. The interface, I think I'm particularly interested in. What's happening on interfaces? I mean, because to some extent people quite like the interface. They like the guitar or the drums or perhaps they like the joystick, I don't know. But what's happening on interfaces? There's this thing, Project
Project Natal.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. That's where I think the second piece of where I think big innovation is coming in the game industry is really in the hardware side. So Project Natal that we just mentioned, which is a Microsoft project, and for those that don't know Project Natal, it is a camera-based technology. Essentially, you can buy what looks like a small, thin camera, put it in front of your TV, and connected with your game system, now you can start to control things with gestures, with your hands. I want to go right, I want to go left. I move my body this way, I move my body forward, I move my body backward. And it brings a whole nother element into gaming, which you couldn't get 5 years ago. The Nintendo Wii has been extremely successful and has brought some of that in. But now these camera-based technologies potentially have the opportunity to take that even further. And when you think about what you can do in this environment with these cameras that can detect you, in a 9 meter by 9 meter square, right? Can we have 2 or 3 people playing game, interacting with each other, sitting in different parts of the room, doing different things? Can you get more immersed into these games now? Can you play a shooter game, which tend to be very popular, where you can actually, hold a rifle like this and aim that way?
Is that really the future, stuck at home?
Shooting at people.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to
Shooting
go
your
there.
relatives.
I mean, yeah.
I don't know if the future is being stuck at home, right?
Okay.
But I would say the future of how game experiences evolve.
Set-top box.
Certainly, that's one possibility, right? Set-top box. I can very easily see gaming, and I think it's another interesting area, where gaming gets taken outside, and very much to what you're doing, Maarten, right, with AR, is gaming not only has to be in the living room, but can you create a device? Can you build something that you can take with you and turn that into a game? And so I think we're seeing, sort of explosion in a lot of different areas, both input devices in the living room or a family room, in the home. Not yet seeing the things that go outside of the home, but I think you're going to start to see that probably within the next 5 to 10 years.
There's a company, I don't know their name off the bat, but they make a gyroscope and they're putting it in phones. So if you look at, remember the example I said about Splinter Cell. So imagine, like, in the end, you finally meet the last enemy. So you just don't just see him. You use your phone to battle him.
Right.
On the street, and yeah.
It looked like a lot of crazy people on the street.
In a year, you can do
wildly,
this.
huh?
In a year, this is,
Right.
like on a platform like Layar, that'll be possible because these
That's
devices will be a guitar like they are already now.
But it has to go beyond gaming. I mean, the issue is that we are getting new ways of interacting with that information, but that also means we're laying down new trails of information for others to follow. So we're still learning about live streaming, what it means to provide your information about location to everybody, what it means to share, what you're listening to, what you're reading, what you're doing, who's interested in it, when it's too much information. And I think that what we're seeing now, and that's going to accelerate over the next 4 or 5 years, is 3 streams. One, social conventions about what you share and don't share have to start getting more established, because you have to start asking yourself, why am I saying this? Why am I putting this in, a tweet or a status update
We haven't
or
quite
whatever
worked
else?
out those rules yet. No,
Okay.
they're messy. It's not catastrophic, but it's a bit messy.
The second element is how can somebody else who's hosting that make use of it? Because it's being persisted somewhere, and that starts going into the ownership of data and the portability of data. But Kai and I were having a discussion, during lunchtime, which I think is at the nub of a lot of this. If you remember the world of print, right? It was only in the early 80s that the concept of WYSIWYG came out, that you could actually start manipulating at the output level rather than having to go through some sort of markup on the source text, right? And it was a huge revolution when you said, wow, I can actually edit text on a what you see is what you get basis. The same is now true of all kinds of relationships we would have with publishing and subscribing to information, that we're going to start editing it at the what you see is what you get level, rather than the complexity of levers that are going to be used to control those outputs. If you actually start editing at output, people are going to say, okay, so that's what I look like on my Facebook profile when a stranger looks at me. That's what I look like. And I think we're going to see new user interfaces for managing our inputs and outputs.
Thank you, gentlemen all. Questions from the floor? Absolutely take your places at the microphone now if you want to raise anything. While we do, convergence. We haven't, I mean, if you'd asked me as a sort of mainstream British journalist, I would have said it's all about finding the one handset that does everything, the games, the GPS, the sat-nav, the mobile, the camera. It hasn't been a big part of your discussion. Where are we on convergence? Andreas?
Well, we have some players here at around, so they produce some technologies which are very valuable and which have a lot of potential to be combined. I know specifically also for eye tracking companies that they are now working on from a head-mounted display to glasses, because glasses which eye trackers integrated do somehow overcome the calibration problems. So sometimes we could have glasses with eye trackers which help us or help the system to see what we look to. We have augmentation, so we have displays, we have geotagging, we have a large wave of linked data providing access to almost everything after some years.
But really, we're getting so many different types of technology that as fast as the convergence is occurring, people are inventing new things to do that are, like augmented reality. I suppose augmented reality is convergent. I mean, it is. Yeah. We don't need a separate handset for that. But
you can stop a little earlier than that and actually see where we've got to. Okay.
Sorry. Let me just finish. Maarten, explain that.
Everything changes continuously.
Right.
And we all know, if you think about it, the phone in the end will also disappear. It'll be in your earlobe or whatever, or in your glasses. And my jacket will know that it's very hot here, and the room will know, hey, Maarten's hot, let's turn down the heat. And is that, that will happen anyway. And I think convergence is almost like an old idea. If we have a TV and a radio, maybe we should combine it. And then we should resell that ad space somehow. That's an old system, old way of thinking.
Right.
But in the meantime, the other devices that, your phone may disappear. But what about my compass? What about my GPS? What about my pedometer? What about my heart monitor? What about my, camera?
It'll be in your jacket because it'll see, how you're doing. And is that then convergence? It's just progress.
I just got to remember where I leave my jacket in that case.
Right.
Oh, it's any jacket probably. It'll be a smart jacket.
Better. Is that Tim at the microphone? Yes.
Yes, hi. So this is one from Maarten. So one of the things people celebrate about the web is that it seems to be, is that it's not dimensional, that you don't run out of space. If I make my website bigger, it doesn't mean that somebody else will have to give up the space. Now, so with augmented reality, everything that's out there is connected to some lat long and altitude in the real world. So presumably that's the interest of it. So presumably, if everything takes off as you'd wish, people will produce millions and millions and millions of layers, or maybe they'll automatically generate. I could write a small Python program to generate a random set of mazes which cover the Earth.
Yeah, please do.
Right. So then, if I'm at a particular latitude and longitude and altitude, does it get a bit crowded? If everything in the virtual space has to be somehow associated with the physical space, how have you thought about how when I'm in a physical space, I'm going to actually select what sorts of things, and will there also be a huge competition from all the people we heard from in the advertising session earlier for my attention? Won't there be desperate pressure for you to sell pixels to sell three-dimensional pixels in the space?
That's a very good question. Stay there though, Tim, because I want to ask a question of you, but go ahead.
Yeah, great question. Again, I love drawing, seeing the patterns in the web, and love talking to you about it. The web has already so much dead pages that nobody watches anymore. And we don't find them in Google, for instance, because it's not ranked in your search, because it is not linked. So just like the web, slowly, like oil that, starts to exist because the dead animals float down, this is also going to happen, is happening in the web, and that will also happen in AR. That's why we launched or announced Layar Stream, to really help people find what's really going on. Right now, if I look at Stream, I see the tweets and the pictures that people took. And those were active because right now people did that, or just now people did that. So then we have like a layer on top of all the other layers that's really about you and about now. And that layer you can configure. And we know, and we definitely believe that we should not push anything. You, as a person who is using augmented reality, should pull, because otherwise this doesn't work. I mean, it's like the old pop-up banner. That doesn't work. We definitely do not believe in that old school type of marketing. It's about vendor relationship management. You, as a person, are in control of your data, whatever you want, and whatever you get. You arrive at the airport, and you're like, right now, you can give me, an offer for a car. Show me it. And then you take it back again. You take out your data again. The driver, or the people that rent out cars cannot see that you're a bad driver anymore. You just shared it, so you have to have a high insurance premium. And then you take it out again. So you are in control. And we know that will have to be a key feature, or like a part of the infrastructure that we're building. Otherwise, it won't work.
But isn't there also a separation, not just in latitude and longitude, but also time?
Oh, yes.
So that, the data that is the web is now being layered in that extra dimension. So,
we had a lot of discussion in the beginning if we should let go of place, because anytime, anything you do, you want to have something to hold on to. And just like yesterday, I put up the Berlin Wall here on the demo, and you can do it. You can put in another lat long, and then you're there, and then you can see the thing. But is it really as powerful? I think sometimes it is. I thought up this for activists, for instance, in Israel and Palestine. There's also a wall there. Now, say you're against the wall, and say you want to give people the feeling of what that wall means to the inhabitants and the people that live in those cities. Well, you can say, open up this layer and see how high this wall is and how much of the other part of your village you cannot see. So there is an example of augmented reality not hooked up to a specific location, but it's actually a transport or a port of something, knowledge, and a notion, an insight, and therefore very powerful.
Open up this layer, Mr. Gorbachev.
Tim, what's exciting you at the moment? I'm interested in what tomorrow's world consists of. What's your tomorrow's world?
I thought I'd come in to ask questions.
It's all hands on deck here.
So there's lots of things exciting me. So generally, the web going onto mobile is exciting me for two reasons. Because mobile things are getting more powerful, and also because only 80% of the people on the planet only 20% of the people use the web. The other 80% are the first way they're going to be able to get it is from a mobile phone. Yeah. So that's sort of important. The explosion, somebody mentioned the explosion of linked data. That's exciting. The fact that, for example, now there is a linked data cloud out there that has lots of things which are linked to they've got lat long on them, or they're linked to things which have got positions. The fact that now there's a lot of information about the structure of the planet, so you can and objects on it and people on it, and a lot of it is geocoded or connected to things which are geocoded. Yeah. But in general, that explosion of data is very exciting. And the challenge actually that I think is out there is, imagine that you've got something like the room there where you're totally surrounded by screens, and imagine you've got something like the ultra-flexible sort of guitar come Nexus 1700 or something come Firebolt 2000, and the ultimate, and you've got the ultimate goggles and the ultimate seat, and you've got all the data out there that anybody knows available to you instantly. I'm interested in how do you make the interface so that a scientist or an economist or a politician or a regular person can just make the most out of and correlate and explore that data. I think that's an interface to the world of linked data, which the non-dimensional world is really exciting.
Can I have a question? Just one short question for you, Tim. What is your advice for a small group of people who believe they are building a new medium which might be as powerful as the World Wide Web?
Just a quick answer, if you would, in 15 or 20 seconds.
Well, I think that sort of people doing that sort of thing, of which there are more and more people around, I suppose you just keep going, no matter what somebody thinks about it. You do sort of look at what other people have done, but don't feel that you have to do a full. That there's no obligation to read all the papers about people, about related work, because there's an infinite number of papers out there. Don't get so when it's just code it up. But the other is realize that when you're building on a layer, you're building on a platform, let's not reuse. So I built on the internet. The web is built on the internet, you're building on the web. Not only is it a good idea to just profit from the platform that you've got to build on and build whatever you can imagine on top of it, but also as you do it, make sure that what you're building becomes a platform. So that for the creativity, currently unimaginable by anybody in this room, for the people who are coming after.
Right.
Very good advice, and that's what you're doing, in fact. Isn't
Generative
it?
architecture is what we're after.
Generative
Thank
architecture, very good. We'll take another question there, yeah.
Thank you. Jesus Badenes from Spain, from Planeta Spain. I have a question for Mr. Rangaswami. You are all one of the few representatives of a company which sits on an asset base. The other are more new economy, digital economy. You are not very likely of having your inventions sold to a third company. I mean, probably you have to use your inventions for extracting value of your existing business model. My question is, having this different perception of, compared to the others, what's the perspective on what are the key success factors for developing new business models? I mean, are you trying to extract value of existing assets? You basically think that this is sunk costs and you basically act as if you were a company from the new economy. What's the perspective you take on partnerships? Basically that. Thank you.
I mean,
Corporate question for you then, JP.
we have for some years established and continued with the process of open innovation and partnership. So we have a program in place whereby our entire network infrastructure is exposed as a set of primitives that people can build software to make phone calls, to be able to send messages between each other, to make conference calls. That was actually at the heart of what encouraged us to go and set up Ribbit. The firm itself is an open multi-sided platform. It works on the basis that pure facilities-based competition cannot last forever. In the UK, we also have a regulator who has made sure that we have true open access here. BT doesn't even have the highest number of lines in the UK. When you have that kind of open access environment and when you know that pure facilities-based infrastructure cannot be the basis of competition, we have selected one brand of competition more than anything else to excel at customer service. That is a challenge, and we've been working at it and improving on it. But part of how we create the services to our customer base is by allowing third parties to be able to build services around us. That has meant that it is possible for any of you, and we have about 30,000 developers at present, actually creating services on top of our infrastructure because we make it possible. The reverse is also true. Once you create the enabling environment, there will be people who say, why can't I use that environment on my infrastructure? And we have to be open enough to do that. But I think that all this talk about business models, we have to put into some form of context. There are only 3 business models in town, however many flavors we want to put it. One is a transaction-based model, one is a subscription-based model, and one is a third-party pays, whether we want to call it advertising or patronage or subsidy. Right? And you can hybridize and say it is all you can eat until you reach some ceiling after which you pay. But that's all it is. But go back to Peter Drucker, one of my favorite non-management thinkers. People make shoes, not money. Right? We're in the business of trying to make our shoes really well, and if we make them well, money will follow. In a similar way, we've got to excel at customer service. That's what we're setting out to do, and the results we've had over the last 18 months shows that. So the model that we're going for is explicitly not locking our infrastructure, making sure we do open it up in the right circumstances, creating an ecosystem where third parties can create value at the edge, and allowing them to establish those models while we get paid for what is used. But the kind of monopoly rents of the past are history, and that has been done through a regulatory process, and we have paid for it and altered as a firm. In this context, especially with so many people from an IT type background or whatever, that I've been speaking to over the last 25, 30 years, it took, IBM 40 years to be called evil. It took Microsoft 20 years. It took Google 10. It took Facebook 5. It took Twitter 2.5. Okay? What is actually happening is that the perception of what you can get away with as a company has sharply changed because of consumerization. People expect things to be open. People don't like lock-in. People expect freedom of access, freedom of movement of data, an ability to change from device, etc. And our business models now have to reflect the fact that the customer actually has a say in these things. And unless they do that, nothing will happen.
Who has more fixed lines than BT in the UK?
Who has more lines? O2.
O2, okay. The issue of the commercials, I just want to get very briefly onto the money side. I mean, because your business is not funded. I mean, it's funded as an investment at the moment, but isn't making money. You're describing for BT a business model of giving everything away.
We're
because
not
that's
giving
what
everything
no,
away.
but I mean, it's much more open. I mean, it is much harder to make money in a world where businesses don't have control over things.
When things
which is why
commoditize, it makes sense to focus on customer service as your
that's right.
differentiating factor.
I mean, it is essentially, the consumers are getting a bit feisty, and essentially they do start calling any company that succeeds in monetizing things.
They're individuals.
They succeed,
They're not
they start calling those companies evil, don't they? Just how much of an issue is funding? How much of it is it for you, Andreas? Is funding, do people ask questions about revenues and business plans and such like?
So we are non-for-profit. So the question is, how many could we make of money to reinvest? And so we have to take care to keep the status, to take profit of all the benefits, to be a non-for-profit organization, and to have flexibility like a company. And so it's always the question what you should do, and finally what you decide for.
And in terms of Guitar Hero, I mean, you're not at the company anymore, but was funding an issue? Was investments an issue? Was raising the cash an issue, particularly post-crunch, financial crunch?
Raising the cash when we were starting the company was an issue. And we went out and tried to raise money for 6 years and could never get it.
Right.
So
right, you have one success under your belt, then you can raise as much as you want. But does that persist?
But then, going to the latter half of your question, in our business and gaming, it's a content-driven business. So, it's much harder to commoditize, right? We make a guitar game, somebody else can't just say, oh, let's make a guitar game, and of course it's going to work. Well, it's very difficult to do that. So, for us, we don't have to worry as much. We always have to worry about competition, but less about commoditization. But, we spend a tremendous amount of resources behind developing of the games, and luckily when you get a big hit, Guitar Hero.
Let's test that. I mean, what percentage of your sales are now on commodity devices rather than on the plastic guitars? Are you seeing a bigger take-up on the Android and on the iPhone, or is the bulk of the take-up on the physical hard device? Because my expectation would be the market is much bigger when you have a commodity environment you lay your service on.
So for us, the video game console platform in our business, video game console platform is still the biggest platform by far. And that is where we're able to maximize.
In net new sales.
In revenue sales. Right. That's where we're able to maximize, because the content, again, is unique. It's harder to commoditize that content on that platform. And there's a generally set price, generally accepted price for a video game, 50, 60 pounds, right? And so Guitar Hero as a franchise, is one of the few sort of mega franchises. It's generated over $1 billion in sales in each of the last 3 years. And when you get mega franchises like that, obviously we're profitable, we can reinvest that. Not always the case, right? Video games being a hit-driven business, you've got 10 products, 9 of them fail, and your one mega franchise pays for all the other 9. That's where it gets much more complicated.
Sure.
I look forward to next year, and I look forward to seeing how different the Tomorrow's World session is next year from the Tomorrow's World session this year's been. Just remains for me to thank the panel, Andreas, Dengel, JP Rangaswami, Kai, Huang, and Maarten, Lens-FitzGerald. And thank you for your questions, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all. Very good. And now, I'm handing over. I have a question. Okay. We were just about out of time. I'm sorry I didn't see you. I'll tell you what, we'll take it up afterwards, okay? I do apologize. I looked like...
Take advantage of the people of the gaming industry right on top of the thing.
You want to what?
Take advantage of the gaming people on the stage to ask a question on education.
Go on, ask a question very quickly. 10 seconds. 10-second question.
My
Go
name
on.
is Christian Guerra, and I come from Italy, from Rome, and I just found out it rains more in Rome than in London right now. But okay.
Yeah.
I work for the Italian Ministry of Culture, and my question is: one of our goals is to get young people within the museums and the historical sites. And my question: how can gaming help education and make it more fun? And what would you suggest?
I think that's one for you, Kai. Put a guitar on the.
That's right. Put a guitar on everything you do. No, actually, I think that's a great question, and it's something that I've personally been fascinated with. I think what's great about the game industry is that when done right, we create these very engaging experiences, right? Some people call it addicting. I call it engaging. And people want to come and play. So the thing that constantly is going through my mind now is, how do you take what we do in the game industry and take that to other fields? So education is a perfect example of that. You know, typically what you see today, education is not a lot of fun, right? I have this joke with my brother. He's got 2 young daughters that are in this after-school learning program, and part of that program is they give them math problems on a piece of paper. They do the math, they turn the paper in. Well, there's this video game called Brain Age, where part of that video game is doing math problems. And his girls will sit there for hours and play that game. Yet when asked to do math problems on a piece of paper, they don't want to do that. It's like pulling teeth. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity to take what we do in the game industry, which is create these really engaging experiences. And there are very subtle ways to do this. Leveling up, reward systems, that you can apply to other areas. I think for me personally, I'm very interested in looking at health and fitness. Huge problem, you know, particularly in developed countries. How do you take gaming and apply that to health and fitness, where it's an experience that people just really don't want to do, but can you develop some kind of experience in a way that's fun and exciting, and people do it, and the side effect is that they're losing weight, or the side effect is that they're learning? I think there's a tremendous opportunity in the future to do that.
I think what when you discussed earlier about social collaborate versus social conflict, right? One way we can resolve some of this is by, in history and geography, the augmented reality has a huge role to play for being able to create treasure hunts, discovery techniques where you gain points for being able to have visited places, read up things, given answers, and I've already seen that evolve in Layers.
All good parents know you make a game out of getting the children to tidy their bedrooms, and it's more fun. It actually doesn't work for very long, but it does for the first few times. Panel, thank you. Get off. It's time up.